The bus first took everyone to a military airfield where they waited. After disembarking, they boarded an Il-76 transport plane. The flight was short, about an hour and a half before landing. After landing, they waited at what kind of airfield it was, about 2 or 3 hours, until a dozen or so trucks arrived. Some trucks carried people, others loaded cargo, and they set off again in the early hours of the morning. When a truck was crammed full of about 20 people, there wasn't enough room to lie down or sprawl out. Those leaning against the front and sides of the truck had some support, while those sitting in the middle could only use their backpacks as cushions against their lower backs. They didn't know how long the journey had lasted, and Gao Fei had fallen asleep again sometime during the drive until the entire truck was shaken awake. This arduous journey was finally nearing the mountain top. They faintly heard gunfire, very weak, but also very clear. The man leaning against the side of the vehicle lifted the tarpaulin and peeked out through the gap, then muttered something in Persian. Most of the passengers were Russians, but at least 3, presumably Iranians, had infiltrated the vehicle. They spoke neither Russian nor English. Samir, being well informed, quietly told Gao Fei that they were speaking Persian. 28. Although they would all be comrades in arms later, strangely, the people travelling together showed no interest in talking to each other. Despite being only 20 people, they were divided into 4 distinct groups. 4 Central Asians, presumably from 5 Stan countries, but their exact nationality was unknown, were also speaking Russian. 3. The 3 Iranians were one group, and Gao Fei was naturally with Samir. Logically, Samir should have been more familiar and closer to the 3 Iranians, but he showed absolutely no intention of greeting them. Since sticking together was definitely not an option, Samir immediately tried to ingratiate himself with Gao Fei, because he had no one else to befriend. Suddenly a series of rumbling sounds rang out. The sounds weren't far away, but they weren't dangerously close either. Samir whispered, 152mm cannon 5 kilometers away, it's fine. Gao Fei knew all the models of 152mm cannons. It wasn't an exaggeration. Whether it was self-propelled artillery or towed artillery, he could accurately identify the specific model upon seeing it, and even know the year it was developed and entered service. But identifying a 152mm cannon, just by hearing the explosion, was something Gao Fei could never do, no matter what. A typical military enthusiast. The vehicle suddenly stopped. Soon, the soldiers guarding the rear of the vehicle struggled to their feet and untied the knots securing the tarpaulin from the inside. Almost simultaneously, shouts began outside. The tarpaulin at the rear of the vehicle was lifted, and the escorting soldiers were the first to get out. It was still dark outside, but the dawn was already visible. Get out, hurry up! The tailgate opened, and the soldiers jumped out of the vehicle one after another. Gao Fei couldn't help but glance around. They were now in a village, with a not-so-wide road and houses on both sides. It was still quite dark, and they couldn't see very far, but the houses in the distance looked relatively intact. After getting off the vehicle, all the new recruits quickly assembled together, without any formation, just a large, chaotic mass. Gao Fei couldn't help but wonder what would happen if an artillery shell hit. Then he quickly shook his head, because he was also in this chaotic mass. As the group nearly gathered, a tall, thin man in camouflage, without a hat, strode to the front, surrounded by a dozen or so people. "Hello, welcome to the 4th Assault Team. I am your commander, Colonel Andrei Bogatov. From this day forward you are members of this heroic unit, and I will lead you from one victory to another. Do a good job." Wagner's assault team was a regimental-level unit, approximately 1,100 men, with subordinate units of company, platoon, squad, and team. Therefore, the commander of the 4th Assault Team was equivalent to a regimental commander. There was no opening, no megaphone, just a brief welcome to his new subordinates before the crowd. No instructions, no further explanation. Colonel André saluted, then turned and walked away before his recruits could return the salute. Too decisive. Are all Russians this straightforward, or is it only the Wagner group that's so casual? Those who only speak English, come closer. Everyone, come here. Before Gao Fei could even react, someone shouted, "English speakers, this way!" It was still chaotic, but at least someone was calling out in English. Gao Fei and Samir exchanged a glance. Nothing more to say. They went over. The crowd began to disperse. Most of the new recruits were Russian, and they had their own system for assigning them to units. Those who only spoke English were much fewer, so they would inevitably be grouped together. A young officer, wearing camouflage but with the epaulets of a second lieutenant on his shoulders, stood nearby. Wagner was a mercenary. Ordinary soldiers didn't have ranks, but officers did because they frequently interacted with regular Russian units, and without ranks, many things would be inconvenient. Finding no one was approaching him anymore, the second lieutenant called out loudly, "Hello, I'm Vatlev, the Deputy Company Commander of E Company, 4th Assault Regiment. Our company is predominantly composed of foreign personnel. From now on, you'll be joining E Company. I will lead you to our position. Now, who among you can only speak English? Raise your hand." Gao Fei raised his hand, and Samir also promptly raised his. Gao Fei looked around, but didn't see anyone else raise their hand. Gao Fei glanced around. A dozen or so people had gathered around him. Counting them carefully, there were 13 new recruits, including himself, and 14, including the officers. It wasn't an auspicious number. Only 2 of them spoke English, but what surprised Gao Fei was that the 3 Iranians who had come in the same vehicle were also in this group. Okay, you need to learn Russian as soon as possible, so who can speak English and Russian? The rest of the men raised their hands. If you couldn't speak English or Russian, you couldn't join the veterans. Take Gao Fei, for example. If he only spoke Chinese, even with his extensive combat experience, he'd have to start learning the language in basic training. Being completely unable to communicate on the battlefield is fatal. Lieutenant Vatlev nodded, seemingly satisfied. Very good. Next, I'll lead you to collect your ammunition. Anyone who wants to exchange weapons should do so now. Anyone want to exchange weapons? Immediately someone raised their hand and shouted, "Sir, I want a sniper rifle. I'm a sniper. Sir, I'm a machine gunner." They'd been issued AK-74 rifles upon arrival, but they could exchange them here. "I can get you a sniper rifle, but we don't need a machine gun. There are plenty on the position." Vatlev glanced at his watch and then said, "Follow me." "Sir, are we going to the position already?" "Where is this place?" someone asked, but Vatlev replied without hesitation, "You don't need to know." "Sir, when is lunch?" Vatlev, who was turning around, paused. He turned back, looked at the person who asked the question, and said coldly, "We'll eat once we reach the position. No questions asked, now." No one spoke. The army wasn't a place to joke around. There are troublemakers everywhere, but they weren't stupid. They wouldn't dare offend an officer in their command at this time. Although Vatlev looked quite young, an officer was an officer. Samir didn't dare whisper anything to Gao Fei this time. The two obediently followed Vatlev to a pile of ammunition. The ammunition unloaded from the trucks was scattered haphazardly over a large area. Load as many bullets as possible. We'll be going to the position in armored vehicles. Don't be stingy with your energy. Carry as much as you can. Ammunition boxes were piled up like a small mountain, and there were also many loaded machine gun ammunition belts. Gao Fei and Samir exchanged a glance, then began stuffing boxes of bullets into their bags. Pack as much as you can until your bag is bursting. Ammunition is just the basics. There are also RPG rockets, mortar shells, machine gun ammunition belts, and boxes upon boxes of grenades. Although they're all light weapons ammunition, the quantity is truly enormous. Take as much as possible means that besides filling your backpack, your hands can't be empty either. Take as much machine gun ammunition as possible. Wrap several 12.7mm ammunition belts around your body. The front lines are short of this, so hurry up. Logistics will send ammunition to the front lines, but again, don't trust any logistics unit. Whether ammunition will even reach the front lines once fighting starts is uncertain. Also, once fighting begins, you'll always feel you don't have enough ammunition. Never that you have too much. Gao Fei had two 50-round, 12.7mm heavy machine gun ammunition belts wrapped around his body, his rifle slung around his neck, and each hand carrying a 200-round 7.62mm ammunition belt box. It was busy and chaotic, but that doesn't mean the Russians lacked organizational skills. Clearly, this was a temporary command post, as well as a temporary distribution center and logistics hub. According to information Gao Fei had seen online, regimental command posts now either need to be located further back or, if located further forward, require frequent relocation. Otherwise, they'd be immediately targeted by enemy drones and artillery fire. The reason Colonel Andrei, the regimental commander, left after only a few words was because staying any longer risked being bombed. Therefore, it would also be dangerous for Gao Fei and his group to stay too long. The time spent collecting ammunition was short when 3 armored personnel carriers approached. Upon seeing them, Vatlev quickly ran to the front of the vehicles, spread his arms, and shouted, forcing them to stop. Samir urgently said, "Everything has to be grabbed. Get in the vehicles or we'll have to walk several kilometers. The armored vehicles might not be empty. We must get in, and we have to be quick." Before the vehicles even stopped, Vatlev shouted to the group, "Quick, get in the armored vehicles." Samir took off running, getting ahead of everyone else. So far, Gao Fei had observed that the Wagner group wasn't exactly a motley crew, but it wasn't exactly elite either. He wondered if the Wagner group's reputation was just hype, or if the Russians were simply that sloppy in their operations. Vatlev said Samir had started running before they were even ready to board, and he was quite fast. He carried just as much gear as the others, yet he was ahead of everyone else. Samir reached the rear of the first BMP-2 armored vehicle. He immediately discarded the machine gun ammunition he was carrying in his right hand, opened the rear door with one hand, and, finding it empty, tossed the ammunition box he was carrying in his left hand into the vehicle. Instead of immediately climbing into the armored vehicle, Samir appeared to be picking up the discarded ammunition box, but in reality, he was guarding the door, preventing anyone else from entering. Samir waved one hand, gesturing for boarding, and shouted, "Up! Up! Quick! Quick! Quick!" Samir had been watching Gao Fei's position closely. Once the fifth person was on the armored vehicle, he immediately stretched out his hand, stopping the soldiers trying to board, and yelled, "Full! Get in the back!" Gao Fei was at the back. He desperately wanted to speed up, but the difference between a military enthusiast and a real soldier became apparent at that moment. Carrying dozens of kilograms of equipment while running was something Gao Fei had never trained for before, not even once. So, despite his youth and strength, he simply couldn't outrun them. It would be truly unbelievable if someone with even a little military knowledge could outrun soldiers who had trained for years. After Gao Fei finished last, Samir gave him a push and then climbed into the armored vehicle. The BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicle has 3 crew members and can carry 7 infantrymen. And, as with armored vehicles in any country, the rule is the same. Those who board first sit down, making room for those behind. Luckily, there were 3 armored vehicles. If only one had arrived, all 13 people wouldn't have been able to fit. In that case, the others would either have to walk or sit on the roof. A single shell hitting an armored vehicle would kill everyone, but sitting on the roof, a burst of bullets could be fatal. That's the difference. In short, being quick always has its advantages. Gao Fei wanted to thank Samir, but everyone in the vehicle spoke English, so he hesitated and remained silent. The armored vehicle started quickly. The space inside was already small, and with 7 people packed full of equipment, it was difficult to even turn around after all 7 people were squeezed in. The air was polluted, the ride was bumpy, and he couldn't see outside. Combined with the smell of diesel fuel, Gao Fei soon felt carsick. He had to control himself. Vomiting would be embarrassing, but being looked down upon would be a much bigger problem. Enduring the pain of car sickness, the armored vehicle finally stopped after about half an hour. Immediately, someone outside shouted, "Get out!" "Quickly!" Gao Fei jumped out of the armored vehicle with Samir. "Have we finally reached the front lines?" It was already daylight outside, but the sun hadn't fully risen. Farmland surrounded them, and ahead lay rows of trenches. Everything was quiet. There was no gunfire, only the occasional distant explosion, but it posed no real threat. "Follow me quick!" Vatlev called out, running rapidly towards the trench entrance. The trench entrance was a ramp, quite wide, about 2 meters across and 2 meters deep. The armored vehicle was parked almost directly opposite the entrance. A dozen or so men followed the deputy company commander, rushing in a scattered fashion. They quickly got into the trench. Staying outside was dangerous. Once everyone was off the vehicle, it immediately drove off without pausing. Leaving less than 100 meters along the trench, they reached a crossroads. Vatlev turned, and after another 10 meters or so, another turn led into a section of trench covered with camouflage netting. Not far ahead, they came to a section of trench covered with logs, then topped with soil, but without any ceiling at either end. It wasn't exactly a fortress, more like a section of trench with a roof over it, but this was the company headquarters. "Company commander, I've brought the new recruits back." The company headquarters had about a dozen men. The covered trench was over 10 meters long and about 3 meters wide. Many ammunition boxes were placed along both sides of the earthen wall, and the middle section was also filled with stacked ammunition boxes serving as a table. A middle-aged man in his 40s looked at Gao Fei and his men, then said, "Only this many men? All right, good job." Gao Fei and his men all rushed into the company headquarters, making the already cramped trench even more crowded. "Soldiers, you are now members of E Company 4th Assault Team. I am your company commander. You can call me Chip. Time is short, so I won't say much more. Here are body armor vests. Put down what you're carrying, put on the vests, and fill your magazines. Against the wall were stacks of bulletproof vests, besides ammunition boxes. No wonder they hadn't been issued before. They were only distributed at the company headquarters. But upon closer inspection, Gao Fei noticed that all the vests were second-hand, and many were blood-stained than clean. To wear the vests, he had to remove all his gear. Gao Fei had to take everything off and pile it on the ground before reaching for the vests. But Samir simply dropped what he was carrying, squeezed past the company commander, and grabbed 2 vests first. Samir ran over to grab the vests, even rummaging through them, before finally pulling out 2 and squeezing back when the company commander looked at him in astonishment. There are plenty of bulletproof vests, no need to steal them, right? Besides, even if they stole them, the bulletproof vests Samir brought back still had bullet holes in them, both of them. Gao Fei clearly saw that some vests were intact, some were even clean. Samir solemnly handed Gao Fei a bulletproof vest, then said in a very low voice, "2 shells won't land in the same crater, and there won't be new bullet holes in a vest that's already torn." Gao Fei looked at his vest. There was a bullet hole in his right chest area. Both layers of vest had been pierced. This bulletproof vest has a spirit ring on it. It must. The bulletproof vest with the spirit ring also smelled a bit bad. The bloodstains on it had turned blackish-brown. But so what if it smelled bad? A spirit ring is a good thing. Hopefully, the previous user of the vest could protect him. If so, this vest might provide some magical defense in addition to physical defense. Samir specifically stole this bulletproof vest. He definitely had to wear it. Gao Fei was already fully equipped, and then he began to load the loose bullets one by one into the magazine. They had been marching so fast that they hadn't even had time to reload. They wouldn't be able to load the empty gun until they reached the front lines. While the new recruits were changing into their bulletproof vests, the company commander shouted, "Let me give you a brief overview of the situation. The city of Bakhmut is less than 5 kilometers ahead. We're advancing steadily, and progress is going smoothly. Just a few days ago, our position was the Ukrainian front line, but now it's 2 kilometers ahead." Hearing this, Gao Fei knew things were going badly. Only 5 kilometers from the city of Bakhmut, but with the forward positions only 3 kilometers away, the battle for the city had entered its most critical and bloodiest phase. This was a fiercely contested front line, meaning it was repeatedly fought over, a situation where one side would fight today, the other would fight back tomorrow. Pretending to be a veteran was to avoid becoming cannon fodder, but in this kind of repeatedly contested battlefield, everyone is cannon fodder. Don't worry, you'll be deployed on the main rear positions. Behind us, there's the 32nd Airborne Brigade Reserve position. You'll also receive constant fire support from company-level mortars, and there are 2 heavy artillery regiments and a heavy rocket artillery battalion in the rear, all capable of providing heavy firepower support at any time. So, our firepower is very strong, extremely strong. The company commander reassured the new recruits lest they be terrified before even reaching the battlefield. For Gao Fei, this was indeed good news. Instead of being stationed on the front lines, he was assigned to the main positions. For this reason alone, the significance of Gao Fei pretending to be a veteran became apparent. There's more good news. If you achieve significant results in battle, the reward will be issued immediately, cash, euros, and dollars, not with your monthly salary. Not everyone who joins the Wagner Group to fight is there for the money, but a considerable number are certainly there for it. After the company commander finished speaking, Samir asked without hesitation, "Company commander, how are the rewards calculated?" "Once we get to the front lines, your squad leaders will explain it to you in detail." Looking at his watch, the company commander continued, "Now, Lieutenant Vatrev will escort you to the front lines. Good luck, everyone." Vatrev clapped his hands and said, "Everyone, follow me. Remember, maintain social distancing and stay close to your comrades in front. We're moving out." After passing the company command post, they traversed a trench covered with camouflage netting, then rounded a bend, arriving at an open communication trench. The 13-man formation stretched out quite long. Samir slowed his pace, waiting for Gao Fei to approach before whispering, "We definitely need to be in one place. We need to be in the same combat group." Gao Fei glanced up at the sky, then whispered, "We'll talk about that later. For now, stay away from me. We'll keep at least 5 meters apart and lag behind a bit." Samir raised an eyebrow, giving him a questioning look. Gao Fei said, "Didn't you see online? There are so many drones now. Who knows where we'll encounter one? If you were a drone pilot, would you bomb a crowd or a sparsely populated area?" "Ah, that makes sense." Samir fell silent, slowing his pace and maintaining a distance of about 10 meters from Gao Fei once he reached the front. If you're going to do something, do it thoroughly. Samir had a good habit of doing things properly. The company headquarters is 2 kilometers from the front line position, but that's a straight line distance. Walking through the winding trenches, the actual distance is unknown. The main position will be set up further back, but not too far from the front lines. The exact distance depends on the terrain and troop strength. Here, the terrain is a large plain, so conventionally the distance will be between 400 and 1,000 meters. The better the trenches are dug and the more complete the position set up, the closer the distance can be. However, without a systematic trench network, the distance between the main and front line positions will be greater to prevent them from being wiped out by a single enemy attack. From what Gao Fei observed, the trenches are quite well dug. The communication trenches are dug very neatly, alternating between zigzag and sawtooth patterns, which significantly reduces the lethality of artillery shells. Support trenches and reserve trenches can be seen along the way, but these functional trench sections are deserted. The support trenches were empty because they originally belonged to the Ukrainians, and after Wagner captured them, their support positions became unusable. The reserve trenches were usable. In the event of a large-scale offensive, manpower would need to be assembled there. However, without a large-scale offensive, the reserve trenches were also empty. There wasn't just one communication trench, and there were frequent intersections. Without a guide, finding your position accurately would be difficult. It had been at least 2 kilometers since leaving the company headquarters. Gao Fei didn't feel particularly tired, just his fingers ached from the trenches. The long, straight trenches were the most basic type, but Wagner's trench system was much more complex and functional. Ahead was another intersection in the communication trenches. This time, the communication trench branched off into 4 1-meter-wide trenches, clearly designed as support trenches for combat. Vatlev had to stop and carefully observe the trenches. After calling out on his walkie-talkie, he led the way into one of the trenches. Just then, an explosion suddenly rang out ahead, followed by Vatlev's shout, "Drone, don't stop! Move on!" Gao Fei quickened his pace, walking along the trench. He quickly saw the unfortunate victims of the explosion. One man lay motionless on the ground. while a recruit struggled in agony 3 meters away. It was probably a grenade. It wasn't very powerful, but the two soldiers were too close, only 3 meters apart, so one grenade could kill both. Before even entering the battlefield, two were already dead. The number 13 was indeed unlucky, and 14 was even more unlucky. Vatlev was still shouting urgently from ahead. "Move faster! Don't stop! Move aside! Don't stop! Make way! Someone will come to rescue him!" The trench was already very narrow. It was difficult for two people to pass side by side. Vatlev was at the forefront, now urging people to move quickly, rather than ordering the wounded to be carried away. Gao Fei quickened his pace and stepped over the motionless recruit, who was still struggling in pain and howling loudly, but no one stopped to help him up. This was definitely not right, but Gao Fei knew why Vatlev had done this. The reason was simple. They had been detected by the drones, and when drones are deployed, it's usually not just one. This was a grenade that hit two people, but if they stopped to try and treat the wounded, more grenades would likely be dropped. So, speeding through the most dangerous area would actually save the wounded. A simple reason. Drones drop bombs on areas with many people. Gao Fei stepped over the wounded again, and this time he recognized them as the two Iranians from the same vehicle. His speed suddenly increased, and at that moment Gao Fei heard another loud explosion ahead. It was another grenade, this time accurately thrown into the trench, and again aimed at the most densely populated area. Another scream. This time only one unlucky person was hit by the grenade. Vatlev didn't stop. He shouted hoarsely at the front, "Go faster! Don't stop!" The wounded man was quite clever and probably a veteran. He didn't block anyone's way or call for help. Instead, he lay down on the spot, rolled over, and pressed himself against the side of the trench. Although blood was flowing from his legs, he gritted his teeth and didn't utter a sound. This is the advantage of being a veteran. Veterans know that spreading out quickly is the safest option at this time. If they slow down their comrades, they might all die together. A protective net appeared above the trenches ahead. Further on, there were bunkers above a section of the trenches. The bunkers were rudimentary, just branches and planks covering the trenches, then covered with a layer of dirt. But this simple protection was enough to withstand a drone attack. Vatlev was the first to rush in. He turned back and urgently shouted to the others behind him, "Quick! Quick!" Gao Fei was the second to last to rush into the bunker. There were 3 people in the bunker. Now there were 11 more, making it slightly crowded. Vatlev, panting, said, "I'll go get the new recruits to the front lines. 3 people in the back are wounded. You take the wounded here. Don't worry about the dead. I'll send the morgue team." 3 have already been killed or wounded before even reaching the position, and the people here seem quite used to it. Okay. A man carrying a rifle went outside and looked up. He could see the drone through the camouflage netting, but the drone's camera would be blurry looking down through the netting, and falling grenades would be blocked by the netting, rendering their fuses ineffective. After watching for a while, the man with the rifle shouted, "The drone's gone. You can go too." Vatlev beckoned and said, "Follow me, let's keep going." Continuing forward along the trenches, once the camouflage netting was gone, Gao Fei couldn't help but look up. At that moment, Vatlev pointed to a trench that curved outwards and said, "3 men go here. You're the machine gunner, right? You 3 go." They began to enter the position. Each trench led to a position. Vatlev had a good memory. He remembered which of the recruits was the machine gunner, so he specifically assigned one. The three men silently followed Vatlev into the trench he indicated, while the others continued to follow him forward. After walking a few dozen meters, Vatlev said, "Two men go here." After walking 40 or 50 meters, they split up, sending a maximum of 3, a minimum of 2. "Sir, we two used to be comrades in arms. Can we go together?" "All right, you two go." At another fork in the road, Vatlev pointed to a trench, and Gao Fei and Samir were assigned to the same trench as they had hoped. After walking less than 20 meters, the trench turned, and immediately after the turn, they could see a light machine gun leaning against the trench. Next to the light machine gun was an anti-artillery hole, where a man sat curled up, staring blankly at Gao Fei and Samir. "Is this where we'll fight?" Gao Fei walked to the front of the artillery bunker, placed the machine gun ammunition box he had brought beside him, and greeted the soldiers inside. "Hello." There were several artillery bunkers along the trench, and another one about 5 meters ahead. Inside, another person was huddled. Upon seeing Gao Fei, the person immediately said, "There are plenty of bunkers. Find one and hide before you speak. I'm your squad leader. Everything here is done my way." "Yes, sir." Samir quickly chimed in, dropping the ammunition box he was holding and ducking into a bunker. Before Gao Fei entered the bunker, he glanced around. In this section of the trench there were 4 RPG-27 rocket launchers, 1 RPG-7 rocket launcher, and several assembled rockets scattered nearby. In another hole nearby were 2 grenade boxes, open and full of grenades. If there were only 4 people, this firepower was quite formidable. Gao Fei entered the bunker. It wasn't large, but it was spacious enough for a person to sit comfortably with their backpack, though sitting was the only option. All 4 men were hidden inside the bunker, barely able to see each other, only their voices audible. Given the current situation, casual conversation seemed inappropriate. "Let me explain the situation to you. You are now part of the 1st Platoon, E Company, 4th Assault Team. I am your combat team leader, Shokorov. The forward position is 400 meters ahead of us. The people on the forward position are still alive, so we have early warning ahead. We need to be wary of drones and the daily artillery bombardment. Do you understand?" Gao Fei replied without hesitation. "Understood, sir." Samir also shouted, "Understood, sir." "Very good. Then just wait. I have nothing more to say. We'll all be in the same trench from now on, but our team leader doesn't seem interested in getting to know us." The new recruit. Gao Fei thought for a moment, then took off his backpack, opened it, and pulled out a plastic bag. Following Chinese custom, he'd start with cigarettes and alcohol, but unfortunately there was no vodka, though cigarettes would suffice. He took out all the cigarettes, tore open a pack inside the bunker, put one in his own mouth, peeked out, and then quickly ran to the outside of the bunker under the machine gun emplacement. He handed the cigarette over, whispering, "Hey, buddy, got a light?" The veteran looked at Gao Fei with surprise, then pulled a lighter from his jacket pocket, lit it for himself first, and then casually lit Gao Fei's as well. This gesture was quite friendly. A cigarette quickly broke the ice. Gao Fei lit a cigarette, nodded to the veteran, and then casually handed him the pack he had just opened, saying, "Any more cigarettes? Keep this pack." The veteran looked surprised, but immediately took the cigarette and said without hesitation, "Thank you." Gao Fei nodded, then immediately ran towards the team leader's position. He only heard voices, but didn't see anyone. After walking a few meters, he saw another veteran huddled in a bunker. "What are you doing out here?" Gao Fei pulled out another unopened pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed it over, saying, "Team leader, have a smoke." Team leader Shokorov immediately reached out and took the cigarettes, but said urgently, "Get back to the bunker quickly, it's dangerous outside." Gao Fei didn't leave immediately. He said sincerely, "Team leader, do you want something to eat?" "Hmm? I brought some bread with me. Do you want some?" Thank you." Gao Fei immediately said, "Wait a moment, I'll get it right away." Gao Fei returned to his bunker, retrieved several large loaves of bread, and handed 2 to the machine gunner as he passed. Before the gunner could thank him, he immediately ran to the team leader. Shoklov snatched the bread, took a bite, and mumbled, "I've been eating compressed biscuits for days. Is there any water?" "Yes, yes." Gao Fei could have brought everything at once, but he didn't. He wanted to make several trips. After distributing the bottled water to the 2 men, Gao Fei returned to the team leader, looking expectant yet embarrassed. "Team leader, do you have a cell phone? Could I borrow it to make a call? It's very important to me. I urgently need to call my family." The team leader hesitated slightly, then nodded. "Yes, but the battery is low. Try to minimize your call time. There's no way to charge it here." Gao Fei had just arrived at the front lines and easily borrowed a cell phone. That's what you call social skills. That's called emotional intelligence. He who eats another's bread is bound to him. He who takes another's money is bound to him. Shoklov ate Gao Fei's bread, drank Gao Fei's water, and even had a pack of cigarettes Gao Fei had given him in his pocket. These were all hard currency on the battlefield. Now Gao Fei was just borrowing it to make a call. Could Shokorov really refuse? Shokorov took out a cell phone, entered the password, glanced at it, and handed it to Gao Fei, saying, "There's a signal. You're lucky." Gao Fei's hands trembled as he took the phone. The signal was only 2 bars, but there was a cell phone signal because they weren't far from Bakhmut city, and Russia hadn't actively cut off Bakhmut's communication with the outside world so far. The battery was indeed very low. The battery indicator was already red. The time shown on the phone was 6:50 a.m. Considering the time difference, it was around 1 p.m. back home. The timing was perfect. Adding the international code, Gao Fei dialed his father's cell phone number. Not knowing if the call would go through, Gao Fei was incredibly nervous as he dialed. But quickly, after a beep, the call was answered. "Hello." Hearing the familiar voice, Gao Fei, forgetting his excitement, blurted out, "Dad, it's me." "Fei Fei, why are you calling so late? Are you all right? Did it go smoothly?" "Dad, listen to me. I found Hao Yangguo, but that bastard sold me to human traffickers. They want to kill me and sell my organs." Gao Fei's father immediately bristled, shouting, "Damn it! How are you now? Did you escape?" "I escaped. I'm fine now." Gao Fei was impatient, and so was his father. They both spoke at breakneck speed. "Did you call the police? Go to the embassy." "I killed Hao Yangguo. I killed 2 people and ran away. The police were with them. When they chased me, I ran into Wagner's recruitment office. Now I'm a Wagner mercenary. It's hard to explain in a few words. My phone is borrowed and about to die, and the signal is bad, so I can't keep talking to you. Anyway, I'm fine now." Gao Fei spoke quickly. He needed to clearly explain his situation, not wallow in sentimentality. His father, after learning his predicament, didn't waste any words, asking directly, "Murder? Can you still come back?" "My documents are with the human traffickers Hao Yangguo hired. My situation is very complicated now, but Wagner has powerful backers here. The police haven't continued to look for me. Wagner's recruiting officer even said I won't have a criminal record. I reckon the human traffickers and the police might collude to suppress this matter, so I might not be handed over to the police. That way, I should be able to go home when my contract here expires. Mercenaries have to fight. Yes, I'm already on the front lines in Bakhmut. Dad, don't tell Mum. Just say I found Hao Yangguo and I'm here chasing him for money. I know. Fighting. Damn it. Fighting. If anything happens to you, I'll kill Hao Yangguo's whole family. He divorced his wife a long time ago. That was a fake divorce. If you're okay, fine. But if something happens to you, I'll definitely kill his whole family to avenge you. Gao Fei's personality was very much like his father's. He had a fiery temper, and his father's temper was even worse. His main principle was to be clear about right and wrong and to take revenge if there was a grudge. All right, I get €1,000 a month fighting here. I'll transfer it back to you later, plus bonuses. If things go smoothly, earning 20 or 30,000 a month shouldn't be a problem. 25. It's better than working, but nothing's better than you being alive. You have to be careful. But remember, the more afraid you are, the faster you die. You have to be bold, careful, and observant. Don't be reckless, but also don't be a coward. Cowardly soldiers die quickly. All right, listen to me. Don't tell anyone I'm a mercenary. If I do, I won't be able to go back. Just say I'm working here to earn money. I know I definitely won't say anything. This has to be kept a secret. The signal is bad here and you can't charge your phone. It's normal not to be able to contact anyone. I'll try to get you a cell phone later. Don't worry, I've studied military affairs for so many years, I'm not that easy to kill. I know, you won't die. If you die, I'll kill Hu Yangguo's whole family to avenge you. Don't mention this. If my mum asks, never mind. You can make up a story. I can't hide it anymore, Fei Fei. Gao Fei's father's tone turned somber. He said helplessly, once I've paid off most of my debts and can fly again, I'll go to Russia to rescue you. Gao Fei retorted angrily. Can't you just give me a break? Do you expect me to never contact you again? I've already killed Hao Yangguo. What's wrong with letting me just stay here and make some money? Is it fun wasting my phone battery with all this nonsense? Sigh. Gao Fei's father sighed deeply on the phone while Shokorov whispered beside him. Get to the point. Don't turn off the phone. 6 months. I'll be back in 6 months at most. I'll call you when I have the chance. Dad, take care of Mum. I can't say any more. I have to turn off my phone. Be well, Mum and I. Be careful. Be careful. Gao Fei hung up the phone, let out a long sigh and handed the phone back to Shokorov. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. Not very long, but Gao Fei had explained everything he needed to. Gao Fei didn't want his family to worry about him, but worry was definitely better than knowing nothing and only being able to guess. The families of missing persons suffer more than the families of fallen soldiers. Absolutely. Knowing that Gao Fei died on the Russian-Ukrainian front, his parents would definitely be heartbroken, but not knowing where Gao Fei was, not knowing his situation, and searching for him in fear every day, was actually worse than letting them know that Gao Fei was dead. However, this also had a problem. Knowing Gao Fei's father as he did, if he really died, his father would really avenge him. But as long as Gao Fei doesn't die, his father won't need to avenge him, and he definitely won't go to Hao Yangguo's house to cause trouble. He might not even admit to being tricked by Hao Yangguo, because making a scene would be detrimental to Gao Fei. So, after making this phone call, even if Gao Fei dies, he'll know the truth. If he hadn't made that call and said those things to his father, neither Gao Fei nor his parents would have a single day of peace. Now it's all right. He's said everything he needed to say, and even if he dies, he won't die with a mountain of secrets. Pah! I won't die. I definitely won't die. Gao Fei couldn't have such unlucky thoughts. He spat 3 times to dispel the bad ideas and the misfortune they brought. Now that the call was over and his mind was clear, Gao Fei looked at Shokharov and sincerely said, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Shokharov glanced at his phone, thought for a moment, then turned it off before putting it back in his pocket. He said, apologetically, "I could have let you talk longer, but this phone uses a Ukrainian SIM card, and I can't pay the bill once it's used up. Sorry." Shokharov was a kind man. He was still embarrassed about urging Gao Fei on. "That's enough. That's enough. Thank you. It's dangerous outside. Let's go into the bunker." Gao Fei quickly moved back into his bunker. He felt refreshed, and since he had nothing else to do while hiding, he could finally examine his gun properly. The AK-74 was a common weapon, nothing special, but it was Gao Fei's first time handling a gun. So he removed the magazine, examined it, then put it back in, raised the gun and aimed. This was Gao Fei's first proper aiming exercise. Before, to maintain the facade of a veteran, he had to act as if he wasn't very interested in guns. Now he could finally play with it properly. The only problem was that the trench was too narrow. He couldn't aim properly. His eyes couldn't focus. Gao Fei hesitated. He wanted to leave the bunker, stand up and take a proper look outside the trench, maybe even fire a couple of shots. But he felt that was too risky. A smart person wouldn't do such a thing. However, as a seasoned military enthusiast who had never handled a gun before, being able to only touch it was no different from having a beautiful woman sitting on your lap and only being able to look at her. It was so painful, so very painful. Thankfully, reason eventually prevailed over his evil thoughts, and Gao Fei decided to lean out slightly, raise his gun, and aim at the sky. That was all. And Gao Fei actually did just that. Inside the bunker, there was no visibility. You couldn't see the sky. To see the sky, you had to stick half your body out. Gao Fei actually stuck half his body out, aiming his gun haphazardly at the sky, when Shokharov suddenly asked, "What are you doing?" Gao Fei paused, then didn't know how to answer. "Are you a veteran?" Shokharov frowned, looking suspicious. "You're not a veteran, are you? How did you get into the veterans' ranks?" "Ah, no, I am a veteran." Shokharov shook his head, pointing to his eyes. "Don't lie to me. You're too excited. I've seen too many people handling guns for the first time. I know what it's like to touch a gun for the first time. You've never fired a gun before, have you?" Gao Fei hesitated, then said, "No, I'm just observing the sky to see if there are any drones." "Observing doesn't require aiming. Do you know what I used to do? I was a safety officer at the firing range. I've dealt with many chins. I know exactly what a veteran who frequently uses a gun should look like." Shokharov has a sharp eye. "I'm just curious because I've never used an AK rifle before. I'm observing the sky while familiarizing myself with this new weapon that's unfamiliar to me. Shohorov scoffed. All right, I'm not a recruiter. Even if you weren't a veteran, I wouldn't send you back. It's always good to have one more person here. What are you afraid of? I just want you to tell the truth. Gao Fei was a little embarrassed. He was still looking for an excuse, but just then he really saw a drone. Team leader, there really is a drone above us. Gao Fei put down his gun, shrank back, and pointed upwards from the artillery shelter, saying, "Is there really a drone? No, our position is a low-value target. They won't use drones to attack us. It's pointless, unless it's a reconnaissance drone." As he spoke, Shokorov peeked out and examined the drone closely for a moment. Finally, upon spotting it, he exclaimed in astonishment, "Sukhabrai! Artillery reconnaissance drone! Fuck! Beware of artillery fire!" The drone was small, just a black dot in the sky, moving slowly by. It was unclear how Shokorov had identified it as a reconnaissance drone. Perhaps he'd been there long enough to distinguish it. A reconnaissance drone is overhead. They're going to shell us. There was only one walkie-talkie and one radio on the position. The walkie-talkie was on the team leader, Shokorov, who was warning his comrades in nearby positions to be careful of the shelling. Before Shokorov could finish speaking, Gao Fei heard a whooshing sound, like a truck passing by, followed by a deafening explosion that drowned out Shokorov's voice. A series of explosions followed, very close together, but clearly coming from all directions. The explosions were short-lived, only a few dozen shells firing only once before stopping. Firing only one volley was not good news. It was clearly a test firing. This was a test firing, a large-scale test firing, not a gradual advance of barrages, not a precision shot at a specific target, but the prelude to a widespread artillery barrage. Military enthusiasts have a slight advantage on the battlefield. Knowing some basic military knowledge is useful. And a seasoned military enthusiast like Gao Fei certainly knows what to do in the face of a large-scale artillery barrage. Squat in a bunker, cover your ears, and pray no shells fall near you. Next, it was purely a matter of fate. Life and death were entirely up to luck, and had nothing to do with knowledge or skills. After waiting for a full minute, Gao Fei suddenly felt a tremor beneath his feet, and he immediately covered his ears with his hands. A deafening roar, but the enormous explosions were enough to shake one's very internal organs. The first shell landed nearby, but the good news was that it didn't hit the trenches. The explosions became increasingly frequent and intermittent, followed by incessant tremors beneath his feet, and a constant cascade of earth falling from above. He didn't know when the bunker would collapse. Gao Fei's legs began to tremble. He could barely maintain his crouching position. The upper body trembling was due to an overabundance of adrenaline, but the leg trembling was genuine fear. Gao Fei couldn't help but scream, shouting at the top of his lungs, but the explosions were so intense that no one could hear him, so it wasn't too embarrassing. The extremely intense artillery fire lasted for several dozen seconds, but to use a cliché, it felt like decades to Gao Fei. A rapid barrage of fire cannot last long. After roughly the limit of one volley, the intensity of the explosions immediately decreased. In just 1 minute, those who weren't killed simply didn't have any shells exploding at close range. It's that simple. The shelling continued, but Gao Fei knew it couldn't last forever. A shelling of this scale would require at least 100 cannons firing continuously, but with such a vast battlefield, After firing at most a basic load, the artillery would concentrate its shells on the front lines. If this widespread shelling wasn't just Ukraine venting its anger, then it was preparation for a large-scale counteroffensive. Sure enough, Gao Fei had just mentally reviewed all the types of large-scale shelling when he heard Shokorov shout, "Don't go out, keep waiting." Shokorov had a walkie-talkie. Only he could know about any changes ahead immediately. Fine. A hellish start right from the battlefield. The explosions were still ringing out, but the ground had stopped shaking. A good sign, but only temporarily. The artillery fire would spread, gradually advancing with the enemy's attack. So they couldn't rush out of the bunker. They had to wait for Shokorov's orders. Just then, Gao Fei heard Samir yell beside him, "Rex, are you still alive?"